47 huge steel columns going up the core. They're interconnected. How do you get them to fail simultaneously so the core disappears? It looks like those core columns were cut.
The way we do this is by cutting the beam at an angle.
I started looking at the molten metal. All three buildings, both towers, in the rubble, in the basement areas, and Building 7, there's these pools of molten metal.
You'd get down below and you'd see molten steel running down the channel rails, like you're in a foundry. Like lava.
The molten steel was found 3, 4, and 5 weeks later, when the rubble was being removed. He said that molten steel was also found underneath World Trade Center 7.
So I'm looking through the official reports. What do they say about the molten metal? They say nothing. Now, wait a minute. This is important evidence. So where'd that come from? Thermite is so hot that it'll just cut through steel, through structural steel, for example, like a knife through butter. The products are molten iron and aluminum oxide, which goes off primarily as a dust. You know those enormous dust clouds? You can imagine when you assemble these chemicals on a large scale. Molten metal pools under both towers after they collapsed, and Building 7. Now, Building 7 wasn't even hit by a jet.
Part of the problem is that most people simply don't know much about Building 7 due to the extraordinary secrecy surrounding this collapse.
And this was a 47-story skyscraper. This building fell at 5:25.
It was not hit by a plane. This building had fires on only 2 or 3 floors.
It was brought down by what we know was a controlled demolition.
Demolitions, they look just like that. A kink in the middle, and then that building just comes straight down, almost at free fall speed.
They first blow one of the central columns so the building falls in on itself. Building 7 had a classic crimp or wedge. Its central column was blown out first, so it didn't structurally damage buildings just a few feet away from it.
Watching The Echo on Channel 4. My name is Q Marskiani, your host tonight. This is the special edition of The Echo, the 2 hours show. We are covering 9/11 too. What was the... I mean, I can't even start talking about the things that we just saw. But any of you, anything? Because I'm just too much information, like... Every time I see the footage.
I think that, you know, as time goes on, we're starting to put the 9/11 puzzle pieces together, and, you know, for even in the mainstream, stuff is starting to come out, and we're getting a picture that what we were told, what happened that day, and that's the gist of the 9/11 show, is what happened that day is not the truth. Yeah. The results of the investigation were not fair and balanced, and you know,
absolutely,
it was an agenda that, you know, and the pieces are coming together.
Especially the pancake effect and things like that. That is ridiculous, because what's happened to the core, the solid core? Like, if you're, and how is it possible the pancake effect would collapse the building at free fall? Like, you know, I don't get that. My physics was not that good at school, but I know the basic of physics. It wouldn't happen like that. And yes, go on.
Well, I was just sitting here thinking, I mean, I was a teenager when this happened, and I suppose not to be sexist against my own gender, but I mean, I'm not an engineer, I'm not an architect, I don't build things, I don't work construction or anything like that, but I knew this was impossible. And I remember trying to tell people there's no way that this could have happened. At the time that 9/11 happened, I didn't necessarily believe that it was a total inside job, but I thought that the government definitely wasn't telling us the whole story. I think that I still had good faith in the government at that time, that I thought, well, maybe there were good reasons or something that they weren't telling us the whole story. But I definitely tried to tell people some of this. You don't just have a plane fly into a building and it just goes straight down. I mean, it doesn't happen. And then people tried to say that some of this was fires that caught fire in the different kitchens because there were so many restaurants in the World Trade Center.
What the heck?
And that turned to tell me.
That turned to the one of the most solid building in the New York City and maybe in the world.
Yeah, fire that started in the McDonald's fryer pen. Yeah, exactly.
Goodness.
Well, the Pentagon thing though, there's a memorial there at where the flight plane, allegedly the flight path, that knocked over the light poles, which it would have had to, go up and down there at the last few moments to actually have hit those light poles. I mean, but I think one of the best things is the pilots for 9/11 Truth have a, documented, and there's a thing on YouTube where several eyewitnesses, including Pentagon cops and other cops, say that no, the plane didn't fly that way, that the 9/11 report says. And in fact, there's other people that say it just went straight on over, looked like it hit it. Now those cops and stuff, they think the plane hit the Pentagon, but they say that it was a total different flight path. That and the light posts were potentially staged because the elevation that the plane would have had to fly. But the 9/11 Pilots for Truth, that's got some great damaging things that punch holes in the official story.
Let's watch the next clip because I don't want to actually miss that last clip. If the next clip is ready, please roll it for us, Sam.
According to standard operating procedure, if an FAA flight controller notices anything that suggests a possible hijacking, the controller is to contact a superior. If the problem cannot be fixed within about a minute, the superior is to ask NORAD, the North American Aerospace Command, to send up or scramble jet fighters to find out what is going on. NORAD then issues a scramble order to the nearest Air Force base with fighters on alert. Although interceptions usually occur within 10 or so minutes, in this case, 80 or so minutes had elapsed before fighters were even airborne.
It's a mind-bending anomaly. Not a single U.S. Air Force interceptor turns a wheel until it's too late. There are no jets at all.
What if they were so confused and had been so deliberately confused that they couldn't respond?
The reason that they didn't know where to go was because a number of conflicting and overlapping war game exercises were taking place. It involved the insertion of false radar blips onto radar screens in the Northeast Air Defense Sector.
Center Team U, we have a problem here. We have a hijacked aircraft headed towards New York. We need someone to scramble some F-16s or something up there to help us out.
Is this real world or exercise? Is this real world or exercise?
There was another exercise, Vigilant Warrior, which was in fact, according to a NORAD source, a live fly hijack drill being conducted at the same time. With only 8 available fighter aircraft, and they have to be dispatched in pairs, they were dealing with as many as 22 possible hijacks on the day of 9/11, and they couldn't separate the war game exercises from the actual hijacks.
Page 172. The U.S. government has not been able to determine the origin of the money used for the 9/11 attacks. Ultimately, the question is of little practical significance.
The American authorities have not managed to trace the source of the funding. And then the most amazingly disingenuous statement ultimately is of little consequence. It is of massive consequence.
Doesn't it matter who paid for 9/11?
The collapse of Building 7 has been recognized as especially difficult to explain. The 9/11 Commission report implicitly admitted that it could not explain the collapse of this building by not even mentioning it.
Why are you and the Vice President insisting on appearing together before the 9/11 Commission?
Because the 9/11 Commission wants to ask us questions. That's why we're meeting, and I look forward to meeting with them and answering their questions.
Why you're appearing together rather than separately, which was their request?
Because it's a good chance for both of us to answer questions that the 9/11 Commission is looking forward to asking us, and I'm looking forward to answering them. Let's see.
Do you think they should be able to stand up and speak their own words?
They should go under oath.
They should be, yeah, in public.
Don't you think that the families deserve to have a transcript or to be able to see what you
Adam,
said?
you asked me that question yesterday. I got the same answer, yeah.
The final report was a unanimous report. That means that if there was a single commissioner who had any objection about anything, that fact would be dropped from the report.
We have found out that he not only served on the transition team of the Bush administration, that he was a person who wrote a draft memo for the setup of the Bush administration's National Security Council, that he was an individual who wrote the preemptive war strategy that was eventually used for the war in Iraq, that he is a close friend of Condoleezza Rice's. We want him to resign.
There is literally nothing in the 9/11 report that the Bush administration did not approve of.
We can understand, therefore, why the Commission, under Zelikow's leadership, would have ignored all the evidence that would point to the truth, that 9/11 was a false flag operation intended to authorize the doctrines and funds needed for a new level of imperial mobilization.
Knives, armed with chemical, biological, nuclear weapons. Fanatics, terrorists, September 11th. September 11th, killers, September 11th. Terrorists, Al-Qaeda, terrorists, nuclear weapons, terrorists. 9/11, terror, terrorists, evil. September 11th, September 11th. The terrorists, war and danger. September 11th, terrorism, global terrorism, terrorism, terrorists. Terrorists, 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 the terror. Terrorists, terrorists, terrorism. September 11th, global terrorism, terrorists. Terrorism. September 11th, world terrorism. Terrorism, September 11th, global terrorism. September the 11th, terror, weapons of mass destruction. September the 11th, terrorists, the evil terrorists, no.
Terrorism. The words are hypnotically repeated. Terrorism, terrorist, terrorist threat, and of course, believed to be linked to Al-Qaeda. But it's the so-called war on terrorism that's in our faces practically 24/7 as the inescapable focus of our existence.
One day, our grandchildren will look back on this time and ask, how was the war on terror won?
The entire U.S. ruling class, ruling elite, comes to see terrorism as the preferred means, indeed the only means, to provide social cohesion, to provide